Welcome back, everybody. I am Sarah. This is my co host here. And today we have Dr. Leland Stillman on the podcast to talk all about non native EMF and our mineral balance, how those two things are related, as well as medical freedom. So stay tuned. Hello, everyone. Again, welcome back to the show. Today's episode is with my friend, Dr. Leland Stillman. Now, he's a second-time guest on the show. We actually were planning on talking about these topics the first time that we recorded together, but we ran out of time. And so that's why I brought him back on. He is a quantum functional medicine doctor. So he uses things like circadian rhythms, light therapy, grounding, these things that seem a little bit woo-woo, but uses them in a medical sense to help support his patients in healing. And he also has a fantastic book that's going to be linked down in the show notes for you guys, all about medical freedom, which, if you know my story, you know is extremely important and near and dear to my heart. So I just wanted to welcome you guys to the show. Thank you for watching. And I have a couple sponsors I want to thank very quickly before we jump into the episode. The first one is going to be Viva Rays. Now I have my hands full, so I can't show you my glasses. But one of the things, as I mentioned, Dr. Stillman does, and that I also do with my clients, is to have them to really be aware of those circadian rhythms when it comes to their overall health. It's a baseline thing that we recommend. So using Viva Rays, their circadian glasses, to help protect your eyes when you are in a blue lit environment, especially at night, can really be a huge health upgrade. Use my code YOGI to save on your Viva Rays. I also want to thank one more sponsor before we jump into today's episode. That is going to be Optimal Carnivore. Now, we talk about in this episode the importance of organ meats when people are going to eat more of a carnivore diet, and how those minerals that are contained within the organ meats are just crucial. So you can use my code Carnivore, uppercase Y, to save over at Optimal Carnivore. I do have these Brain Nourish. These have been really amazing post-pregnancy when I'm not getting enough sleep because someone needs to eat a bit more often. And I also used their organ meat complex as well as their beef liver prenatally and during my pregnancy. All right, enjoy today's show, and I will talk with you guys again very soon. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. I have a repeat guest with me here today, but he's got some updates, a brand new book, and we're going to talk about some different topics. So, Dr. Stillman, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be back.
Yeah, I'm just so excited to chat with you. Let's talk about your book first, and then maybe we can jump into some of these things about minerals and non-native EMF.
Yeah, so the book is called Dying to Be Free. It's right next to me. You can get it on Amazon. If you're following me on Instagram or wherever, it's in the link in my bio. And I wrote the book, started to write it when I was really furious about what was going on over the last 2 years and seeing all this just nonsense being peddled and pushed on the public. And I've been aware of all this for a long time. And really, like, COVID was just the tip of the iceberg for the stupidity that is the American public health establishment. And I decided to just give people my best research and knowledge about all the other mistakes that they were making in one book. And really, what this ends up being, practically speaking, is exactly what I cover with people in consultations. What's making them sick, why they haven't heard about it, what they need to do about it, from light to EMF to nutrition and diet and things like that. And that's the book. And I talk a lot about, misconceptions that people have about how to be healthy that we, keep seeing in the health and wellness space. People overusing things like sauna or overusing things like certain types of breath work that actually can create some imbalances in people that, you just don't hear about when you're just on the sort of podcast circuit um, because people are just, I mean, a lot of them don't have the clinical experience to know what's
Yeah,
good and what's bad.
yeah.
And then a lot of them are just talking to a very small subset of the population. And a lot of people don't realize what applies to somebody else who they might think is like them totally doesn't apply to them at all. And that's, part of why I think the whole, COVID response was ridiculous. This idea that everyone needs to do the same thing and have the
Hmm.
same protocol and have the same whatever is just, totally falls apart when you actually start tailoring your approach to the actual individual in front of you rather than just following a cookie cutter cookbook type approach. So that's the book. It's
I
great.
love
Buy
it.
it.
Yep, I'll put it in the description so everyone can check it out. And I think
Yeah.
that's a really important um, topic to cover because there are so many doctors out there or scientists that are promoting things like sauna, cold plunging, and kind of this one size fits all approach.
Hmm.
And I'm sure that you see it as a practitioner. I see it as a health coach that people try these things out and they end up worse off than when they
Right.
first tried
Exactly.
them. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, I see it all the time, and I see it in their labs too.
Oh,
We'll
really?
talk about, oh my gosh, yeah. So like, I'll see somebody with a high zinc level and a low copper level.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they heard that they needed to take zinc, so they took 30
Zinc.
milligrams of zinc every day, 50 milligrams of zinc, 75 milligrams of zinc every day, for
Yep.
5, 10, 15 years. Sometimes less than that, 6 months. But you'll still see this flip in their zinc copper balance in
Mhm,
their blood. And you'll see it show up on their hair tissue mineral analysis.
mhm.
So I totally get why people want to just reach for the thing that they're told they're deficient in. But when you actually get into looking at people's diets, and I do this with people, I had a patient recently. She found that it was like the GI Revive supplement from like Designs for Health or something.
Mhm.
I can't remember. It was that, and it's an herbal preparation plus some zinc carnosine, and she found that that really helped soothe her gut. When we looked at her diet, her GI tract was so compromised that she had so much trouble um, tolerating red meat that
Mm.
her diet was super low in zinc. And so it made sense that when she took this zinc carnosine supplement, it normalized her zinc intake and she felt much, much, much better. She was never hitting a normal zinc load in the day. Otherwise, she
Wow.
was getting to 3, 4, 5 milligrams. You might need 15, you might need 20. I'll see people getting that much who manifest a significant deficiency, and I give them zinc and they feel much, much, much better. And you'll see the same thing with copper. You'll see people come in and it's like, and this is, I'm going to talk to you about this because I think this is funny, but it was really the timing of when people on the carnivore diet went cuckoo for beef liver
Oh,
was
yeah.
really funny to
Yep.
me because people got off on the carnivore train 2, 3, 4 years ago, right?
Yep.
And the carnivore diet with skeletal muscle meats is very high in zinc.
Yep.
And the carnivore
Low in
diet with
copper.
just a little bit of nuts, seeds, green leafy vegetables, fruits, but also beef liver, let alone shellfish, which are the other main source of copper.
Yep.
uh, you know, that zinc will drive that copper down. And it was very, very consistent across my practice. The people who came to me eating a lot of animal products had sometimes they had a low zinc, but more commonly they had a high to normal zinc. They had low mag, they had low potassium,
Mhm.
and they often had a low copper.
Mhm.
Now, I just recently had somebody coming to me with that kind of picture, and I got a second round of labs and I said, your copper's higher this time. What's going on? And I was like, are you eating beef liver? He's like, yeah, as a matter of fact, I started taking beef liver capsules. I'm like, well, it's definitely showing up in your blood. So, my friend Jim Laird, who works with me in
Mhm.
my
I know Jim,
practice,
yeah.
Jim's awesome. Have you interviewed him?
I need to. I really need
You
to.
do. You do
Yeah,
need to
you guys
interview
did a
Jim.
great talk at the summit. I loved it. So, yeah.
Thanks. And we have another summit coming up later this month. High Energy Women post is on my Substack.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. And so, he likes to say small hinges swing big doors.
Mm.
And it's so true. And that's one of the reasons I'm passionate about minerals is that people don't realize they got like one or two foods in their diet or one or two rules in their diet that is completely derailing their wellness because it deprives them
Mhm.
of a critical nutrient or group of nutrients or creates a significant imbalance. Sometimes it's a supplement, sometimes it's a food they don't eat, sometimes it's a food they absolutely have to eat. They get a minimum amount of that per day. And minerals is one of the ways that it does it, that
Yeah,
happens.
that's so funny that you say all that because in 2020 I had Morley on my show and Morley did my hair tissue mineral analysis. He did blood work for
Mm,
me. And I had been strict
Really?
carnivore for 2 years. Yeah.
Hey, yeah.
Textbook exactly what you just said. Low
How
copper,
about that? It's
low
almost as though I do
potassium.
this for a living.
Yeah. And it was then in 2020, I was like, I got to start eating more organ meats. I have to start, so since
Yeah.
then I had to like switch a bunch of stuff with the way that what I ate and stop being so
Yep.
super restrictive because it was really, really showing up. And the low potassium, I mean, because we talk about these things, you can see it on an HTMA, you can see it on
Mm-hmm.
blood work, but it
Mm-hmm.
manifests low energy, thyroid
Mm-hmm.
issues.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people have like mental, I was having like brain fog, I was just feeling more
Yeah.
tired. Can you talk about
Right.
that a little bit? Because we can talk about, well, lab is low and that's, but what does that look like for somebody that's going through something like that?
Oh yeah, it's so funny. I actually just had a case like this come into my practice, and I got the labs back, and she had a couple of different B vitamin deficiencies based on
Mm-hmm.
organic acids testing, and then her hair tissue mineral analysis, almost all the minerals were low.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Sodium, potassium, copper, zinc, everything across the board. That's a classic picture for fatigue because
Mm-hmm.
the minerals run metabolism. She also had low tissue levels of minerals as well. So, minerals participate in the vast majority of biochemical processes. I always kind of laugh at the marketing shtick of like magnesium participates in 300 different reactions. It's like people just won't shut up about everything
Right.
magnesium does. And I
Exactly.
get it. I get it. It's one of my favorite supplements. But it also is just the tip of the iceberg
Mm-hmm.
for uh, the mineral picture, the world
Mm-hmm.
of minerals. And so when you look at how they function in metabolic pathways, when you don't have adequate levels of minerals in the body, and you have to remember the body's composed of many different, compartments that are all competing for minerals. So of your magnesium, right, something like 60% of it is in your bones, and don't quote me on this, but it's something like 60% is in your bones and 20% is in your skeletal muscle, and then 9.9% is in your or 9.999% is in your organs and things like that, and then 0.01% is in your blood and your plasma. And so you're constantly trying to figure out, okay, well, what is someone's actual mineral level in their body based upon levels in the blood? And the blood is the last place to see a deficiency
Mm-hmm.
because if you have critically low levels of nutrients in the blood, you die.
Right.
Like severe hypomagnesemia, it's not uncommon for people to just go into cardiac arrest.
Wow.
Same thing with low sodium, you wind up getting encephalopathic, and people get really confused and they can die because of that. With high sodium, they can get encephalopathic. That's what happens when you get dehydrated, and then they become unresponsive and they die that way. With high potassium, it can stop your heart. With low potassium, your heart can go into a fatal arrhythmia and you can die that
Mm-hmm.
way. So I got used to managing all that in the hospital when I was a hospitalist and training in internal medicine. But then when you come out, you start doing integrative and functional medicine lab testing, you start seeing, oh my gosh, you had different levels in the hair and tissues, different levels in the blood, and different levels in the red blood cell versus the plasma versus the serum. Nobody does biopsies of actual tissue, but it'd be
Yeah.
fascinating to see what they would find. And so you just find that when you don't have adequate levels of mineral and mineral balance in the body, because they all compete with one another, potassium and sodium compete with one another.
Mhm.
Um, Lithium and sodium have some interesting interactions. I'll use that particularly in like mental health cases at low doses.
Ah.
Copper, zinc, manganese, molybdenum, they all compete with one another. Um, all the toxic elements compete with your nutritive elements, so aluminum, mercury, cadmium, arsenic. Funny story today, I got in the last couple of days, I got multiple phone calls from the local county epidemiologist who was informing me that my blood mercury level on my most recent blood test was elevated. And it's because I had some mahi mahi the night before I had my labs drawn.
Oh,
So yeah, it's quite funny. It wasn't that elevated. 12 micrograms per deciliter is not anywhere near what I've seen on some of my patients, but um it's enough that the county epidemiologist is calling me It's not enough to get me to stop eating mahi mahi or tuna or swordfish.
Wow.
And it comes right back down. For those of you wondering, it comes right back down when you stop eating all that um, high or medium mercury fish.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so these mineral levels, I think I've heard so many people on the carnivore diet say no
Hmm.
supplements, you don't need supplements, you don't need to
Yeah.
add.
Hmm.
There's even like a
Hmm.
trend of not eating salt.
I
It's
know.
just
Yeah.
like,
I mean, it's
have
every
you've
trend
heard
is.
about this? Like
I don't know. I mean, it's
within
just
the
like
carnivore
I'm never
space.
surprised that someone's come up with something new or some other new weird variation on something else because
Yeah.
it's just a matter of time. And these
Yep.
things become cyclical.
Yep.
Like people got crazy about fish oil. I mean, they've been
Oh
really
gosh.
off the chain on fish oil for so long. I never
Yep.
use it clinically anymore. I just haven't found it beneficial.
Yep.
Um, and I'm not the only one. Like some of my most
Mm-mm.
seasoned colleagues have that same opinion.
I'd love to
And
hear.
I'm
I
not
mean,
talking about the
I've been
yeah.
eating salmon roe the whole pregnancy, like 4 days a week, spoonful of salmon roe, but no, I've been refusing to take the fish oil. I would love to hear clinically why you're not a fan of that for sure.
Yeah, so people don't realize that their omega fatty acid and saturated fatty acid balance is driven by the ratios of these nutrients in their diet.
Hmm.
And seed oils, particularly right now, are getting a really ugly rap, which I think is really myopic.
Hmm.
Um, are industrialized, over processed, uh, genetically modified, pesticide riddled seed oils, toxic to the human body. And would I, label them as hazardous waste rather than, you know, food? Yes. But there's this huge difference between that and organic, non-GMO, um, cold pressed walnut oil or almond
Hmm.
oil or whatever.
Hmm.
And so um, part of that, part of this is that you need a normal fatty acid balance in your membrane to have normal flux of nutrients across it. There's actually tons of literature on this, even going back to like the 50s and 60s. I mean, really old work that people don't talk about or publicize because it's very it's very academic,
Hmm.
and it's actually so sort of far reaching in its implications. It's actually hard to kind of draw clear practical um, bottom line kind of answers from it. My bottom line answers are pretty simple. If people eat an ounce or two of nuts or seeds per day, obviously from a high quality source that have been properly preserved and haven't been, destroyed in the cooking or processing process, they're going to have really healthy, generally speaking, um, fatty acid balance in their red blood cell membranes. There's lots of caveats to that. Like I just looked at some labs last night from a patient I saw a long time ago. He had a fish oil level in his blood of 10. The average person coming into my practice has a level of about 5. That's
Wow.
10% of the red blood cell membrane. The average person's got a level of about 5%. There's a lot of controversy. Should you be 6%, 7%, 8%, 9%? The people selling fish oil will tell you that you want it as high as possible. I
Hmm.
get people better in my practice all the time by telling them to eliminate their fish oil and actually take and ingest way more omega 6s because
Uh,
those omega 3s compete with those omega 6s and they
and it
alter
pulls it down. Yeah.
the lipid membrane chemistry in a negative direction. And a lot of people who are worried about like arachidonic acid, this like terrible,
God.
it's so dangerous. Well, you also need it in order to overcome infections and injuries and things like that. So you actually need a certain amount of arachidonic acid. Now, if you are, Joe Schmo eating at Chick-fil-A and
Hmm.
Wendy's and all these fast food joints where they're loaded with seed oils that are
Hmm.
rancid, you're eating lots of red meat, which is rich in arachidonic acid. You may have a high level of arachidonic acid, but if you're, a wellness enthusiast who eats a pound of fish a day and eats red meat 2 or 3 times a week and doesn't eat nuts and seeds, I'd believe your omega 6 levels would come out to like 25 or 26%.
Mm.
Normal is somewhere between 30 and 35.
Okay.
And that's normal in the health conscious populace that's interested enough in this to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars on a big fancy lab panel that includes this.
Mm.
So I see all kinds of people getting better when we fix their fatty acid balance in their membranes. But the caveat to that is that it's and this is part of why people don't talk about this. It's not like this dramatic overnight, like, oh my gosh, I got so much better. Partly that's because it takes a long time for these fatty acid membranes to turn over. When we look at it in the red blood cell, for example, it's 120 days is the life of the red blood cell
Mm-hmm.
approximately. And so you're getting a 120-day picture of what that person's fatty acid balance was in their diet. And it's also compounded in terms of its complexity by the fact that your body is going to burn some of those fatty acids, which is why, you can go from 2 grams of omega-6s a day to like 20 grams of omega-6s a day. It doesn't mean you go from 20% of your red cell membrane being omega-6s to like 50%. Your body, really triages these nutrients and it will burn what it doesn't want to use in a membrane. And that includes saturated fats, any other kind of omega, whether it's a 9 or a 6 or a 3 or whatever. But the other piece of this that really got me away from using oil supplements was that people were losing sight of the nutritive benefit of the actual whole food. When you look at a lot of studies that look at uh, oil supplementation protocols for clinical
Mm-hmm.
benefit, fish oil for heart disease, fish oil for dementia, fish oil for this, fish oil for that, the most significant pharmacological and potentially therapeutic value of fish oil is that it prevents your body from clotting. So that's
Mm.
great if you've got a clotting problem. If you get clotting problems when you have other micronutrient deficiencies, particularly of minerals, things like potassium,
Mm-hmm.
magnesium, so on and so forth. So when I looked at the micronutrient contents of the foods that were rich in the fats that people were deficient in, what I also found was that people tended to be deficient in the minerals as well.
Mm.
And so I would say, okay, and I want them to get the salmon instead of just the fish oil. I want them to get the B6 in chia seeds instead of just the omega 3s in chia seeds. I want them to get the uh, manganese in tree nuts instead of just the omega 6s and omega 3s. And when you start to see that
Mm-hmm.
with the mineral panels and the fatty acid panels and everything done together, and even amino acids or B vitamin levels, you begin to see, oh wow, I can fix a lot of people with just food,
Mm-hmm.
and I can figure out what they're not eating that they're getting sick because they're not eating it. But it takes time, which is something that a lot of people they want to just get the patients in, do the lab test, sell
Get
them
them out.
$500 worth of supplements a month, see them in 2 to 3 months, and just wash, rinse, and repeat,
Yep.
which is not how I run my practice.
Yeah, and food, it has so many different cofactors, like you're saying. If you just take an
Exactly.
exogenous supplement, the body isn't going to get that full benefit. My first trimester, I had been pretty meat based, not a ton of vegetables,
Hmm.
plants, and I was craving potatoes. It was all I could think about was potatoes all the time, potatoes. And I
Yeah,
was like, get me some freaking potatoes. Just I don't care. I'm not trying to please anybody else at this point. For some reason, my body is screaming potatoes and tomatoes, and I'm going to eat them. Um, and I'm pretty sure, and it actually helped my nausea. It helped. I felt so much better when I would just have potatoes. And then I was like, what do potatoes have in them? And my doctor was like,
yeah,
you need to take B6 and ginger to help with your nausea and this other stuff. And I'm looking at potatoes. I'm like, potassium, B6, like it's got all this stuff that I
I
probably
know.
need, you know?
I know. I
Yeah.
totally agree.
Yeah.
And it's funny because potassium's become one of my favorite elements to work with
Oh yeah.
because I call it the redheaded stepchild of the supplement industry because no one's ever going to make a mint on potassium supplements.
Mm-mm.
You get more potassium in one potato than you do in 10 capsules of potassium citrate.
Yep.
So, no person is going to take 10 capsules of potassium citrate every day,
Mm-mm.
let alone twice a day.
Mm-mm.
And so, what I'll do with people is I'll say, look, you got to eat, a potato, a tomato, a banana, 2 or 3 of these sometimes a day. Figure out a way. And there's lots of other foods that you can incorporate. And then there's certain supplements you can use. One of my favorites is actually it's from Mount Capra Goat
Mm.
Mineral Whey or Goat Whey Minerals. It's super goat. People don't realize goat milk is super rich in potassium.
Ah, I did not know that.
I know. It's like 2 or 3 or 4 times cow's milk. It's
Wow.
crazy.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, raw milk was the other thing I craved. Just it's my whole pregnancy. Thank goodness I have a dealer here that I can get a good high quality raw milk because I never
Yeah,
really
yeah,
wanted milk before. It was not really a thing for me, but pregnancy, I'm
yeah,
like, oh, I need milk. I need milk. I need egg yolks. I need potatoes. And I just, it's one of those times in your life that you don't want to be dogmatic. You don't want to say I have to stick to this certain diet because it's, what I'm doing and who I am. Because I get women literally every single day in my direct messages on Instagram. I'm in my first trimester. I'm trying to stick to carnivore. I'm trying to stick to keto. And I'm just like,
mm, yeah.
why are you doing that? Like, it's just,
I
if your
I know.
if your body is rejecting it right now, there's a reason your body is rejecting this, and it makes you feel nauseous to think about just eating nothing but meat and eggs. You have to
Yeah,
listen to
and
that.
yeah,
Hello, hello. I hope that you're enjoying today's episode with Dr. Stillman. I'm here again with my co host, Mr. James, to thank you so much for watching. Ask if you wouldn't mind to hit that like button, share this episode out with anybody who you feel could be helped, as well as check out Dr. Stillman's book, all about medical freedom. This is a topic that we need to talk more about. We need to unite on this topic. And I really do hope that the message reaches a lot of people from his book. Really do respect him for all of the work he's done on this topic. He's lost a lot of things because he's decided to speak out. So I really do appreciate him and his efforts. Also, check out those timestamps if you want to navigate through the episode to kind of just make sure you didn't miss anything or re listen to anything. And one more little shout out to my sponsor, Upgraded Formulas. Now, we are talking about mineral balance extensively in this episode. The way that I check my mineral balance is actually using that upgraded formula hair tissue mineral analysis. Now, I always recommend getting a consultation when you order your analysis. My code over there is either Yogi or Yogi 12 to help you save. If you've used Yogi 12 before, it's not going to work again. So you can use code Yogi. Now, that hair tissue mineral analysis is going to give you a picture of your mineral balance. And that consultation is where they're actually going to read that test to you. What looks like might be something in the test may not actually be true. So something may look really high on the test, and that actually means your body is excreting that mineral or losing it. So again, I always recommend people get a consultation if they're going to invest in that test. And as you hear in this episode, it is an important part of our health to keep our minerals balanced. So thanks again to Upgraded Formulas. Thank you for listening to today's episode, and I will talk with you again very soon.
yeah, and one of the biggest reasons I see people succeeding on these elimination diets, whether it's carnivore or keto, I mean, technically a lot of vegan diets end up being elimination diets because they're eliminating
Right.
a ton of different foods, right?
Right.
Let alone going gluten-free or dairy-free or whatever. A lot of people have got hidden allergens to things in their diet, and it's not as simple as, oh, I'm allergic to dairy, gluten,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I had somebody recently do an allergy test, and I'm very clear with people. I'm like, look, this is a fishing expedition. I don't know if we're going to come back with like a record-breaking marlin or if you're going to wish you'd bought a new iPhone. And I tell them that because I don't want anyone to be mad at me, like, well, Dr. Stillman, this allergy test was not helpful. I didn't get anything out of this. I'm like, look, this is a fishing expedition. But I do it and I offer it to people and I recommend it to them because I find so frequently that we'll find something that they're reacting to and we'll eliminate it and some troublesome symptom will go away. I've had people who were uncontrollably sneezing, have their sneezing go
Hmm.
away when they eliminated like a food. I've had people who were like I had recently a guy just dropped 2 inches on his waist from eliminating a food he was reacting to. And it's weird stuff. It'll be something like
Wow.
chicken or rice or things people don't think they're allergic to.
Benign
And a
foods.
lot of that plays into fatigue. It plays into these nutritional deficiencies because when your body is chronically activated in terms of its immune system, you're chronically running up or running out of nutrients and burning up nutrients in
Mm-hmm.
your immune system's vain attempts to resolve the problem. And if your immune system thinks that chicken is the problem, it's going to just keep attacking the
Mm-hmm.
chicken. And people will wonder, like, well, I'm pouring all these nutrients in. I'm spending $1,000 a month on supplements, and I'm eating organic, grass-fed, antibiotic, hormone-free, local meat. What am I doing wrong? you may still be eating something that you are reacting to, and it's drawing down those minerals, or it's
Mhm.
creating a picture in your gut where you're not able to absorb the minerals. Then when you actually get the right testing to figure out what you're reacting to, then your body can begin to heal, and all that food that you're spending on, all those supplements you're spending so much money on, finally start to get assimilated into your body, and your body actually starts to come back online and work well.
Interesting. Yeah, I see
Yeah.
some people that go from a highly processed diet where they're eating cereals and breads, and then they switch to a more natural diet. I actually have a girl in my private group right now, and she's like, I've basically switched to everything natural, organic, grass fed, and my hair's falling out. I feel like
Yeah.
crap. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, there's something going on with your gut. There's something you're sensitive to, something that you're eating. There's some sort of a stress happening in your body. If your hair's falling out, you're having gut issues. You were probably like eating all these fortified foods, the
Yeah.
cereals and breads,
Right.
and skating by fine on that. And now that you've taken those out, all the fortification, there's something that you're eating that you've got a sensitivity to, I think.
Yeah, a lot of the time people are borderline with something, or borderline with a nutritional with a nutrient, and then they'll be getting just barely enough of it from whatever they've been eating, and then they'll
Mm-hmm.
swap to a new dietary template, and the bottom will drop out on their supply, and then
Mm-hmm.
that's when problems can happen. But they can also switch into a diet where they're eating more of the thing that they're sensitive to and they're allergic to,
Yes.
and it
Yep.
makes them sicker.
Yep.
So yeah, it's fascinating.
I see that with histamine intolerance a lot because,
Mm,
what's healthy
mhm.
is the fermented foods. And,
I know.
we start
Yeah.
looking at that. Those are like the quote unquote healthy foods. And they're like, why am I have a runny nose all the time and hives and itching
Hmm.
and heart
Yeah.
palps? I'm
Right.
like, what are you eating? Bone broth
I
and
know.
fermented foods, like very high histamine stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, I would
Absolutely,
love
yeah, and
to, oh, go ahead.
those histamine intolerances and allergies go back to mineral problems, and so that's why I did this on my Substack blog at stillmanmd.substack.com. I have a book club, and one of my first book club rundowns was a webinar on Pottinger's cats. And it's one of the things that really turned me on to how important food quality is, and small changes in food quality. Is it cooked? Is it raw? Let alone is it grass fed? Is it grain fed? All these things matter, and we've known about it for decades. But there's such an agenda to suppress the
Mm-hmm.
information because there's so many fortunes and such big fortunes to be made from selling people food that's really not good for them and nourishing
Right.
to them, and really keeping them away from information that really empowers them to be healthy. That's part of why I wrote the book. So,
I think that's so important. And, I was going to segue back to minerals. So I'm glad you, you brought that back in. Um, I'd love to know, one of the things you talked about in the summit was people with mineral imbalances can be a little bit more sensitive to things like non-native EMF. Can we
yeah.
dive into that just a little bit?
Yeah. And so this gets into how non native EMF really affect the body. I think that the central pathway, because there's many different components to this, is through voltage gated calcium channels.
Mm-hmm.
And so those calcium channels and their voltage gating is dependent upon levels of minerals in both the extracellular and intracellular space, not to mention vitamins and
Mm-hmm.
amino acids and things like that that also modulate neurotransmission, which I frequently see abnormalities of. But fundamentally, when you look at how minerals act on the autonomic nervous system, and this does go back actually to Weston A. Price and Pottinger and that webinar I alluded to about the cats, and that I frequently write about on Substack. What you'll find is that the potassium and the magnesium tend to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, and the calcium and the sodium tend to activate the sympathetic nervous system. There's a lot of ins and outs and sort of caveats to that, but generally speaking, that's the case. Um, and so what you'll find is that a lot of people who've got sensitivity to EMF and who are seeing EMF problems in their life, they respond really beautifully to potassium and magnesium supplementation, and they frequently have low overall levels of those minerals. When you look at how EMF are the overall effect on your body, it's a stress. And even when you look at the early animal studies from this, you see signs of stress in the animals. You see elevations in cortisol in human subjects. You see all these signs that the stress response is being activated by non-native EMF. And so that process tends to waste magnesium and potassium. Virtually every stress in life will waste a certain amount of mag and potassium. So when you live in a modern world where basically your success is linked to how much stress you take on, more or less, people are chronically reaching for more and more and more stress
Mm-hmm.
so they can get ahead. And this then creates these chronic deficiencies of magnesium and potassium that are exacerbated by so many things beyond non-native EMF, but end up making them more sensitive. The sensitivity thing is really challenging clinically because it is confounded by the nocebo effect, which is the
Yeah.
ability of the body or the body to create symptoms when the mind thinks there should be symptoms. And likewise, then people who are ignorant about non-native EMF will think that they just have symptoms that have no rhyme or reason. But then you start to investigate that environment and they say, oh, wow, as a matter of fact, like I do sleep better when I'm not next to the smart meter. I do have, fewer GI issues when I'm not next to the smart meter. That's the single biggest problem I see people facing, but there's so
Mm-hmm.
many others. I mean, most people when they get to me have already done the low-hanging fruit of don't sleep with your cell phone next to your bed, don't sleep with your Wi-Fi router on in the same room as you, that kind of stuff. But it makes such a huge difference in so many cases. And because these stressors, whether it's non-native EMF or noise pollution or light pollution or whatever, because they're depleting minerals, once you start pouring them back in, if you don't eliminate the reason that the bucket's leaky, so to speak, well, then you're just pouring it
You're
in and it's
chasing.
coming right back
Yep.
out.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, and it's Dr. Martin Paul. He's the one who, if anyone is like,
Right.
oh, that's
Out in Washington. Yeah.
yeah, I get a lot of people, oh, that's bullshit that, that non-native EMF causes this issue with the
Yeah.
calcium. I'm like,
Right.
no, it's legitimate. And I talked with Dr. Pollock, Dr. Gerald Pollock yesterday.
Well, you
We
did. Wow.
yeah, I
Cool.
talked with him yesterday and he really was talking about the science of the Wi-Fi and exposing the structured water to Wi-Fi and seeing it basically go down
Oh, has he
15 to
been doing
20.
those
Yeah,
experiments?
it's not officially released, but yeah, he has been doing experiments to show that Wi-Fi depletes structured water 15 to 20%. And yeah, we talked
Wow.
about that on our interview yesterday because
That's
people are,
huge.
yeah, and where does we have 99% water molecule in the body? Our cells are
Whatever it
basically,
is. Yeah. It's a
yeah,
lot.
surrounded by water, and it's like, of
Yeah.
course this is going to cause us
Right.
to be dehydrated and stressed and all these mineral issues in our body. Just something as simple as turning off your Wi-Fi or eliminating artificial light could make a huge difference. But if
Absolutely. Yeah.
if you don't do that, like you said, you're just pouring in minerals, you're just chasing electrolytes all the time, you're chasing those minerals constantly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's part of something that you advise people to do when you work with them as a patient. It seems like you really just take this like overall approach with them of, like let's do labs, let's look at your diet, look for food replacements, and then also look at these other things like your light environment, your circadian rhythms, correct?
Yeah. I look at everything because you never really know how much you're going to have to change to reverse the trajectory of their illness because illnesses gain momentum
Mm-hmm.
and you have to deal with that. The more momentum it has, the more work it sometimes takes. But like I said before, small hinges swing big doors. So if someone's just outrageously allergic to something and you eliminate that from their environment, they may have an overnight resolution of a problem. If somebody is incredibly sensitive to their smart meter and you get them sleeping on the other side of the house, they may have better sleep scores that very night and feel better
Mm-hmm.
rested the following morning. But there's so many things that trip people up. Like if you have a serious sleep deficit and you move from an environment where you're getting very poor sleep because of stress into an environment where you're getting very good sleep, you may wake up feeling more tired because you're
Mm.
trying to make up for the sleep deficit. And so your brain says, oh my gosh, we can finally rest. It's time to truly rest. Oh, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. It's still time to rest.
Yep.
And people think, oh, well, I slept worse away from the smart meter. It must not be the problem, right?
Right.
And they're wrong.
Yeah, my daughter, we got her Magnetico sleep pad, and
Uh-huh.
in this new house. So we moved into the new house at the end of July, and I
Yeah.
thought it's just because she's a teenager, that she's doing this now.
Hmm.
She's 14, but we have to sometimes drag her out of bed because she wasn't sleeping very well at our old house. So this house, we've, cut the Wi-Fi, Wi-Shield. We even Wi-Shielded
Yeah.
her windows and put a Magnetico in her bedroom. And the child literally will sleep sometimes 14 hours, but she went so many years of being sleep deprived and just having all these horrific sleep issues that I feel like I'm like, just let her sleep. She needs the
Wow.
rest. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she had horrible acne when we first started the Magnetico sleep pad too, because I know those things can cause a detox effect. So yeah, we did a little chelation along with that. So it's yeah,
Yeah. Yep.
yeah. Those are very
They can trigger
interesting.
a lot of big changes.
I had a friend of mine who's kind of in the quantum community. The first night she slept on her Magnetico sleep pad, it may have been the second or third night actually, her appendix burst. And she had to, yeah, she had to go get her appendix out. But she said she'd had like some nagging pain, but she put the Magnetico down, and second or third night she was in the ER. She's like, well,
Of course, it could be completely unrelated.
this is so true. You never know. I mean, yeah. It's funny. I had told one of my friends about the Magnetico, and she got one, and I said, "Well, my daughter had really bad acne, the first few weeks of that, I think from a little detox." She calls me this morning and she's like, "I have acne. It's only my third night sleeping on it." I'm like, "Could be the pad, could also be the placebo, like what we were talking about earlier.
Right.
You could be expecting
Right.
to have these symptoms because I told you that." So, yeah,
Yeah. It's real.
wonderful. Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think of, any other topics. I know you talk quite a bit about how, people on different extreme diets end up having different deficiencies. I'd love to hear how people who kind of swing the opposite away from carnivore, go more towards vegan, plant-based, what kind of mineral deficiencies and what kind of things they usually pop up with.
Yeah, they wind up with super high copper levels, low zinc, and they'll sometimes end up with really high levels of mag and potassium
Wow.
that the body can't really handle, in my opinion. And then they can wind up with low levels of many of their most essential amino acids. And they can wind up with low levels of saturated fat in their red blood cell membranes. So, but that's the problem when you start dealing with these nutrients in actual quantitative fashion, is that one person will come in on a vegan diet and they have this pattern and this pattern and this pattern. Somebody else comes in on a vegan diet, it's a completely different pattern.
Interesting.
And the way that you really do protect yourself from crazy shifts in your nutrition is by not relying on any one single thing and then eating a wide range of foods. So, it's very consistent in my practice that the people who, as soon as I see a folate deficiency, I just ask the patient, or I just tell them, you don't eat a lot of beans, do you? And
Ah,
90% of the time, they're like, no, actually, I don't. I heard that they were bad for me because of lectins or whatever.
hmm,
Now, that doesn't mean that everyone who doesn't eat beans has a folate deficiency, because obviously these
right.
people are coming to me because they're not feeling well. And it doesn't mean that beans are the only way to fix a folate deficiency. But I'll tell you what, based on the amount of folate that's in beans, it's really hard to maintain a normal folate status without a supplement if you're not eating them ever. The
Interesting.
only other food that comes close on a per weight basis that's common anyway, there may be some out there that I'm not aware of, is broccoli.
Interesting.
Beef liver and other liver sources will have a lot of folate in them, but you're going to end up potentially copper toxic if you don't have enough, if
Zinc.
you eat so much of it that you fix the folate problem.
Right.
And
Interesting.
so those are why that's why I don't have a one size fits all diet. And I find that if you just eat a really wide range of foods, you don't run into problems with allergies and you don't run into problems with nutritional deficiencies because they've all got different levels. And if you're getting a
Mm.
little bit of everything, you wind up with a pretty nice balance typically.
I was going to ask you about anti-nutrients, which I know there's some doctors out there that I feel
Yeah,
it's overkill the way that they kind of talk about it. But I
yeah,
experienced in myself with pregnancy, if I didn't have my dairy and certain foods away from the time when I did take the liver capsules or eat meat, that I would see
yeah.
other levels like ferritin and those things would start to trend downward. I never got
Hmm.
to the point where I was anemic, but my doctor at 28 weeks was like, "Are you eating a lot of dairy? Are you eating, something that could be interfering with
Yeah,
your iron
right,
absorption?" And so I'd love to know how you kind of handle that with clients. I obviously just spaced stuff out and the problem fixed
right,
itself, but
right.
I
You
know
have to
nuts
remember
and
that,
seeds can do that.
yeah, you have to remember that the preparation matters and then the state of your digestive tract matters.
Mm,
So I'll find people all the time who have low levels of, say, pancreatic enzymes,
mm,
or they have signs of uh, failure to break down protein due to either lack of enzymes or lack of stomach acid.
yep.
Um, one of my mentors will put people, pretty much everybody over a certain age, on supplemental enzymes and HCl, betaine
Hmm.
HCl.
Oh, I had to do
And he
that.
does,
It helps
yeah,
so
and he
much.
does it because he sees the clinical benefit of helping their digestive tracts have a little bit more, power to break down food so they can then absorb it. And that cascades into a bunch of other physiological effects. So, for example, when you don't break down proteins in the gut or in the stomach, I should say, let alone in the mouth, um, if you don't do that, they get into the small bowel and they're still very large, and the body perceives them not as nutrients, but as big particles that it has to take care of. And
Mm,
this activates the immune system. And this is why, low stomach acid levels are linked to both infections, because if an infectious agent gets into a stomach with low acid, it's more likely to get into the small bowel where it can cause more of an infection. And it's also why low stomach acid and poor digestive function is linked to allergies. These
hmm.
big particles that haven't been broken down get down into the small bowel. The immune system has to take care of them, so it starts attacking them. Certain foods are more difficult for the body to break down than others, and the preparation matters. So, for example, if you take, flank steak and you beat it with a hammer or mallet, and then you marinate it in pineapple juice and lime, you've got I think it's papain or is it pepsin? I can't remember.
Yep.
You've got an enzyme in the pineapple that's going to break down the proteins in the meat. And then you've got
Oh,
acid in the lime that's going to assist that process because it works better at a low pH. And then your body doesn't have to do as much work breaking down the flank steak, right?
okay.
And this is why people will say, wow, I felt better. I feel great when I drink bone broth, but I feel
Mm-hmm.
terrible when I eat meat. Well, the meat is difficult to break down. If
Mm-hmm.
it's seared and char grilled, it's got all kinds of, you know, burnt end products that the body are really, frankly, toxic to the body.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if it's been stewed and really broken down in heat with water with pressure, a lot of that digestive function is already done,
Yep.
let alone if you take the broth from that and just drink that. So this is like these little pearls that help people understand why they feel better with this or worse with that or whatever. And at the end of the day, I'll frequently look at someone's digestive function through a variety of different methods and say, wow, we really need to support this with some combination of supplements or lifestyle changes. And that's, a whole other story. But then to bring it full circle, people will get derailed by, oh, I got to fix my gut, which just means I got to look at all the things I put into my gut
Right.
and change that. And it's like, no, the gut is modulated by exercise,
Mm-hmm.
by um, by breathing mechanics, by sunlight exposure and light,
Yes.
by earthing, by time outside, by all these other factors, right? And so that's why you have to take a full, comprehensive view, and that's why the quantum world is so fascinating to us who are naturally drawn to this. It's the smallest scales of energy and matter, so you really get an idea of, okay, well, this is what um, is really going on at the smallest scale, and then you can sort of zoom out back from that to figure out what's creating all the imbalances on the bigger scale.
Exactly. I love that. I think that's so important to do too. I mean, because just something as simple as fixing your circadian rhythms and your relationship with light can actually have a huge impact on the gut. I mean, and a lot of people,
I've had gut, and honestly, I get bored talking to people with their GI health
yeah.
to a certain extent before I fixed all that other stuff.
Hmm.
Recently I had a case where the patient was feeling really poorly and they were over exercising. And I said,
Oh
stop
yeah.
over exercising.
Yep.
And when they
There you
stop
go.
over exercising, their GI problems go away. They don't have IBS, they have exercise addiction.
Yep. Exactly. When I was a yoga teacher, I had the same issue. I looked pregnant all the time when I was teaching yoga because I was teaching like, 6, 8 classes a day. And then I was working at a gym. And so I'd go work out with the trainer. And then I was eating a bunch of like beans and nuts and like I wasn't eating any meat either.
Did
So
you eat fish?
I did not eat fish. I was like
Okay.
super vegan. So I was like, why do I look pregnant all the time? And I had
Yeah, and
to
I mean, shocking that you got better when you went on a high zinc, low copper diet.
exactly. Yeah,
What a surprise. And
right.
people don't realize this. Like, you don't just start a supplement and fix a deficiency in 2 weeks.
No,
I've had
no.
patients hit, beef liver twice a week for months. And I look at their copper and I'm like, your copper is still 70. How is that even
Wow.
possible? You know?
Yeah,
And part of that is how the nutrients are being handled in the body with things like urinary pH, salivary pH, and digestive function, blah blah blah. But yeah, it takes time to fix mineral deficiencies, and you got to fix the environment that's created the
yes.
deficiency if it's not only due to what they're eating.
Exactly. Exactly. It's not just one thing. It's not just one supplement. I mean, we didn't even
Right.
go into vitamin D, but all of these supplements, if you look at, I always tell people Google mineral wheel, and it
Yeah,
look
yeah,
at
yeah.
how all of these things are
I know.
interplaying with one another. Fat soluble
Yeah.
vitamins are similar, A, D, E, and K. So
Hmm.
you can't just throw in some D and expect all these other problems to eliminate. It's not going to work
I
that
know.
way.
You
Yeah.
can try. You
Yeah.
can try.
Yeah, I know. I'm talking to Jim Stevenson tomorrow, so that should be. I don't know if you're familiar
Fun.
with his work at all.
I know Jim's. I'm familiar with Jim's work.
Some of Jim's
Yeah,
work. Yeah, it'll be
I do.
interesting. There's some stuff that I'm like, yes, and some stuff I'm like, not sure. So
I'm
it's
open to being convinced by guys
yeah,
like Jim and Morley,
yeah, me
but
too.
I haven't had the time with them and the time with some of the cases that I see with them. And a lot of this is frankly like we don't actually really know.
Right.
Uh, because, and this is why I really like following up with patients. I love to find out what happened
Yes.
because people think they're really good because they get 80% of people better or whatever and they're happy, but it's the 20% of something to teach you who don't come back because your advice was
Didn't work
not
for them.
adequate
Yeah.
or was actually bad for them
Bad. Yeah.
you know
Yep. That's the wild thing that I've learned, just kind of being in the health influencer space
yes,
is
yes,
because I get the messages of people who say, you had this person on your podcast and I did a consultation with her
I know.
and I got
I've had the
worse
same.
and I
I
got
know,
worse.
I
And
know,
then I get
I
messages
know.
like that constantly. I'm like, I'm not freaking
Yeah,
recommending anybody that doesn't take someone in as a client, keep them as a client,
yeah,
follow up with
yeah,
them, follow their
absolutely.
case, because there's so many people out there with these big egos that just say, this is what you need to do and take my supplements or do my regimen or do my diet.
Right,
People do
right,
it. Maybe they feel better for a little bit, but then they end up worse off. And I've been
right.
burned so many times by some of these people. And I'm like, I'm not recommending anybody unless they are literally going to take on clients for the long term, not do these little consultation and see you buy kind of things. It's just, it's
And it's
dangerous.
why I don't get labs before I see somebody
Yeah.
because I'll have people come in and they've spent thousands of dollars on labs thinking that they needed the lab before they saw the practitioner. And I say,
Mm-mm.
first of all, I could have gotten you these labs for hundreds instead of thousands of dollars.
Jeez.
And then you didn't need this, that, and the other lab.
Mm-mm.
This was a waste of time and money. Now
Yep.
I have to explain to you why the lab is a waste of time as well as money.
Yep.
And then I'm like, you didn't do this, this, and this test. And I need these tests in order to understand where you are. And it's it's sad the misconceptions that get peddled to people,
Mm-hmm.
which is exactly what it is,
Mm-hmm.
versus the reality that you see as a practitioner who really spends time with people one on one
Yeah, I was trying to
or in
explain
group
this.
coaching.
I mean, there's a money train. Follow the money train, Big following. They have their own supplement line. They want you to do these tests that, it's a train that they're going to take you on that could cost you thousands of dollars, and you could end up worse
I
off
know,
than you were before you started
I
on the
know.
train. So
And
buyer
I say
beware.
that we do have to admit that some people on that sort of do-it-yourself wellness track, they do get great results.
Some of them, yes.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
find that it lacks a real like rigor and comprehensive overview where, and I say to people, it's like, would you refinish your bathroom? And some of them say yes. And I say, okay, fine. Would you rebuild your car's engine? And they say, well, no. And I say, would you redo your household's electrical wiring? And they say, no. Um,
No.
and I'm just like, well, then why? And I'm like, do you have an accountant? They're like, yeah, of course I have an accountant. I'm like, do you have a financial advisor? They're like, well, yeah, I can't manage all that money on my own. Like, it's confusing, and I don't know what a 401k is. I was just told to get one. And I'm like, so you're going through life with all these expensive advisors who you pay thousands of dollars to per year, and it makes sense to you,
Right.
but you listen to a podcast and buy a bunch of supplements, and then you wonder why you're still sick. This is like
Yeah,
the equivalent of like signing up for every get rich quick scheme without having an accountant or a financial advisor, let alone getting into legal trouble because you don't have competent legal counsel. So
exactly. Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, you know what? It is 2 o'clock, and I know you have to run to your next
I have to
appointment.
run. I got to go see
And
people. Yeah.
yeah, but I just really thank you and appreciate your time today. This has been a great chat. And everyone, please head out, get the book. I'm going to put it in the description. And yeah, thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been great. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye.
Okay.